All right, we're live. Hey, everyone. So we're just going to get started. Luis is going to walk you today. Yeah, we'll start where we left off last time. I'm going to share Luis's screen and we'll get going. Thanks, everyone, for joining.
Okay, awesome. Hey guys. Oh, all
Sorry.
right,
Okay.
no worries. Uh, Today is we're going to work on the Vue app. So I'm just going to show you where we are. So we have um, in the last stream we added a new page for showing the auctions and individually, like like have only the auction information on that page, and also showing the balances of the sell and the bid tokens um, on the same page. So that's essentially where we are, or where we end up the last stream. And for today's stream, we're going to implement various other features. Particularly from an action standpoint, how to bid, how to retract, no, sorry, how to change the minimum bid, how to bid, and I think that's pretty much it, right, Sandy?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's go to our code, to our app, um, and let's go to the auction page. So we have a pages directory, and we have the auction page. So first of all, the first thing that we want to add is a way to change the minimum bid. And this is only a thing that the creator of the auction is able to do. Okay, so in order to do that, we'll need to put a form on the page that will take. They'll have an input in which we're going to put the amount in which we want to change the minimum bid. And after we submit the form, then a transaction will pop up, and then we will be able to change. After the transaction completes successfully, the minimum bid will change to whatever number we're going to input. So let's start doing that. So first of all, we need to add a form to our template. I'm going to add the form at the top. So space form. We can add an input. Just for the sake of simplicity and to have time to implement all the features, I'm not going to go through validation or all of those kind of stuff. So it's going to be pretty simple. So an input and then a button to submit, right? Which I'm going to say, hey, change minimum. Okay. We're going to bind a submit event to this form. And also I will bind a model to minimum bid to our input. And I think that's pretty much it. That's all we need. Let's see how that looks on the browser. Make sure everything is working. Okay, cool. Let's put a header on it, I think, just to okay, cool. There we go. Now, we need to create the change minimum bid and the minimum bid function and state respectively. So first of all, let's create a state. So minimum bid, minimum bid. In this case, this will be in a string or undefined. And also, let's create a function here for changing the minimum bid. Here we go. Okay. I'm going to just export this. Something not that great from the composition API. There we go. Okay. So now I think we have everything in place to change the minimum bid. Therefore, let's go to our contract because we need to actually update our auction contract definition so we can have our fees first message on this contract. So you guys remember our first streams, a contract definition has both a queries and a messages property. Right? So in the messages object, you call or you define message functions, query functions, and on the messages, you define message functions. So in this case, for our message function, we will call it as change minimum bid. Remember, this name is totally arbitrary, so you don't need to follow any particular naming there. But for being really expressive and to show the intention of this method, we're just going to call it exactly the same as the message. So before we continue, I'm going to show the auction factory documentation. This is this one. Just for you guys to see how the change minimum bid here we go. So as you can see, this is a secret CLI command that you will need to run if you want to change the minimum bid for a particular auction contract. Okay. Remember, this feature or this particular message can only be executed by the seller or the creator of the auction. So in this case, as you can see, we need to call the auction contract address. Therefore, we need to, from a Griptape standpoint, we need to adjust our contract definition to handle this message. And then you need to send this particular JSON encoded message, which is called change minimum bid. It has one property called minimum bid, and there is the value of this property is the string with the amount on the denomination of the token that you are, of the bid token in this case. And that's pretty much it. So let's go back to our application. You'll see that if we remember correctly, the get auction info is a query, and what you return from a query is the JSON encoded message that you send to the blockchain, right? In the case for a message function, what the message function returns is something called contract message query, request. And the contract message request is an object that has various properties that you need to set in order to execute a transaction. So in this case, you'll see that if we go and see how this type looks, we're going to see that it has a handle message, it has a memo, an optional memo, an optional transfer amount, and optional fees. Okay. So therefore, the message that you need to, the object that you need to return should have that particular shape of, it should be of basically this type. And as you can see, the only required property is the handle message. Okay, so being that said, we need to define a handle message property on the return object of our message function, and that's all we need to actually execute the message to change the minimum bid. Now, the handle message will be, in fact, the message that you send here, the JSON encoded message that you put on the CLI command. So essentially, what we need to put there is this JSON encoded message, right? So if I go there, I'm going to need to write change minimum bid as the one and unique property of the root object. So change minimum bid, and then inside of the change minimum bid, I have a minimum bid property, which will contain an amount. Okay, I'm going to set an empty string for now. Now, we have seen how to run a query and get information from a query. What we're going to do right now is to execute a message on the contract. But in order to do that, we will need to get a particular value from the user interface that in this case will be the amount in which we want to change the minimum bid. And therefore, this particular method, when we create the contract client, needs to have a way to pass in that value, right, to here. So the way that you can do that is essentially passing in a parameter to this function. But before you do that, you need to take into consideration the following. So for any contract, for any message, query message, or query function, or message function, the first parameter of any of those is something that we call the context. Okay? I'm going to go deep about what context is and how it works later. But for now, you'll need to understand that the first parameter of any query or message function is the context. So therefore, you cannot just do like amount string here, because essentially you'll get an error in this case, as you can see from TypeScript, and because the first thing for any query or message function is the context. For now, we're going to leave it there. We're not going to go deep into what the context is just in a moment. But what you need to know for now is that the context is some sort of environment or global information that you have access to in order that can help you build your messages and queries. Okay, so it has important information or information that you might need to create your messages for any query or message, your JSONs encoded messages. Okay. Now, the next thing that we need to do in order to pass in the amount is actually to, well, put the amount right after the context. So for any parameter that gets defined after the context, that will be converted in the contract client as the first parameter. It will be well, not be converted, but essentially everything that is defined right after the context will be in the same order when you get the contract client, obviously excluding the context. Okay. So in this case, we want to use the amount. Therefore, I'm going to use that amount, put that amount here. Okay. Now, in the this is the auction contract, right? So we have an interface that represents our contract client, and we have our first our query, right? In this case, the get auction info query. Now we need to define another one, but now for our transaction. So in this case, we're going to say change minimum bid, our message, and this returns a promise of a contract message response. I'm going to explain later what this type is for. But for now, just put contract message response as a return, as a result value, as a result type for this promise. And at the same time, this contract message response is generically typed as void for now. So we don't return anything from, or we don't get any information from that transaction. I'm going to explain a little bit more about how this works later in this stream, but for now, this is enough. And we have the context here. And as I think that's a good practice, if you are not going to use the context, you can maybe name it as an underscore or something that you can express to your team members or to anyone else that in this particular message function or query function, you are not using the context, right? And that's pretty much it. Now, the only last thing that I'm missing here is to actually set the amount here as the first parameter of the auction contract, which is the type for the contract client that gets created when we call the create contract client, right? And that's pretty much it. That's all we need in order to change the minimum bid. If we go back to our action.vue and go to our change minimum bid function, we're going to start implementing the body of this function. So essentially what we need to do is to call a transaction when the form submitted, taking what the amount is from the input here, right? So the input, I think we're going to label the input in a placeholder. Say amount. There we go. Let's go and do that. First of all, the first thing that we need to do is to get the, we'll need to get the auction info, right? So in case that we don't have the auction info ready, because the auction info get is being asynchronously loaded. So if we don't have the auction info available, then we don't do anything. The next thing is to convert the amount that we're going to input to the machine representation of that amount. Because in this case, the bit token is secret, and that token has 6 decimals. But we want to write it into, human we want to input that number as human because it will be much easier for people to do that, right? So in this case, let's say amount equals to onConvert. This is the minimum bit value. We also need the decimals from the auction info. So in this case, I'm gonna get those decimals by doing decimals equals to auction info dot value dot bit token token info dot decimals, and then pass in the decimals. I'm going to convert that number to machine, and that's pretty much it. Obviously, I need to minimum bit needs to be available. Right? Right. Now that we have the decimals and the amount, we can call our function from a contract. So in this case, we need to get the there we go. We need to get the contract line for the auction contract of this auction, right? So in this case, we created the contract here. In order to get it, I'll need to use the ref contract to get the contract. So let's go ahead and do that. So in this case, contract equals the ref contract of an auction contract for the auction that we're looking at that point, right? Which we can identify by its address. So now that we have the contract, we can call the change minimum bit transaction and pass in the amount, and that's it. Now, here is a good opportunity to add some sort of, UI, UX features to make it easy to the user to know that you're running a transaction and all of that stuff. I'm going to do something pretty simple, but go ahead and try to do all you need to do to make this a good experience for your users. So in this case, I'm just going to create a loading state while the transaction gets executed. And I'm going to just disable the button when that is happening in this case, just to know when the transaction ends, when it starts and when it ends. And that's pretty much it. Yep. So let's go back to our application and see how that looks. So in this case, this is the amount. We're going to say, okay, I want to change the minimum bit from 1 to 5. Right? So I'm going to click the change minimum bit button. Contract. Change minimum bit is not a function. Let me see what is happening here. So this is the ref contract. Getting the address. Did I? I'm going to refresh this. Try again. Okay, so as soon as I click the change minimum bit button, which I misspell, let's do this again. And I set to 5. You'll see that Kepler gets you get a pop-up from Kepler, and the change minimum bit disabled, right? So I'm not able to click it again. And the idea here is that, as you can see, from this point forward, Kepler will try to sign this message to execute on the blockchain. So in this case, as you can see here, we're executing this contract, which in this case is the auction contract for this auction, right? For Powell to secret. And we are sending this message to that contract, which is the change minimum bid message that contains the minimum bid, and we want to set that to 5 secret. And I can set the configuration for the fees and the gas and all that stuff. I'm going to change this to be lower because we're using defaults, and I'm going to show you how you can adjust this number from when building your contract definitions. But as you can see at this point, all I need to do is to approve this transaction. Right, so I'm going to wait for that to happen. After it finished, the change minimum bid should be enabled again. Okay. And let's wait for that to happen. So it's taking. There we go. At this point, we haven't done any sort of, we haven't refreshing the numbers or whatever. So I'm going to refresh the page to see the results. So if I refresh the page and I go and I take a look at the minimum bid, I can see that now it's 5, right? So as I mentioned, I can change that to where the number is, main as 1, only if I am the seller of this option, or the creator in this case. So I'm gonna try that again, just for you guys to see. So testnet is a little bit slow today, but completed. Now if I refresh again, you can see that the minimum bid now should be 10. And so on and so forth, right? So now that we have implemented the change minimum bid transaction, we are going to improve this a little bit more. So let's say that just after executing this, we want to just reset the form, and something that we could do is to get the auction info again to get the minimum bid gets refreshed after that. There may be ways that you want to avoid executing a lot of queries or messages, mostly queries, I think, very often. For now, I'm just going to do it just to show you guys how that will look. Take into consideration that will require you to do another query and you'll increase the load to whatever node you're using. Let's do that. You can see, change that to 15. Now we can put it. Okay. All right, guys. So this is the first feature that we just implemented. And as you can see, we just executed our first transaction or first message. Now, I told you about that you can adjust the fees, the gas that you are going to use for that particular transaction. And if you remember correctly, if we go back and see how the contract message request looks, you can see that we have a fees property here that we can put. It's optional by default. And if you want to, let's say, use 2,000 gas for this particular transaction, you just put fees there. And if you go back to the application, try to change it back to 1, let's say, click change minimum bid, you'll see that if I go to set gas, well, I need to refresh this. I'm going to set that to 1 again. You can see that we have our 50,000. Then I approve it. Let's wait for the transaction to do that, and now we can see that we have our minimum bid is now 1 again. And we set the fees for the particular gas for that message execution. As a good practice, you might want to have some sort of file in which you keep track of all the different fees or gas for all of those transactions. So that might be a good idea to centralize them and making them easier to change in the future. For now, for the sake of this example, I'm just going to do that. All right, guys. So now that we changed the minimum bid, let's try and bid to a particular auction. So in this case, I'm going to add another form. I know that the auction page is getting a lot of features like holding the same file. For sure, you might want to separate some of this logic into separated components. For the sake of this stream and all the examples that we're showing, we're just going to continue work on the auction page. For this new feature, we're going to place a bid. So in this case, for placing the bid, what we want to do is put another form in which, again, we're going to put an input and a button. The input for essentially getting the amount for the bid. In this case, I'm just going to call it bid. And the button will say, well, we're going to find a submit event to the form called place bid. And I'm going to disable also when loading. And that's pretty much what we need from in our template. So let's go and create some of the things that we need. In this case, we need the bit state and the place bit function, so we can call that. So let's go here and create a cat. Also, we will need to create a new function here for place the place bit. Now, let's go to the Secret Auction Factory documentation and let's see how we can place a bit. Here, placing bids. So as you can see, in order to place a bid, we need to execute the send message on the bid token contract. In this case, remember the bid and the sell token are SNP20s, and we are going to call the send message on that SNP20. And in order to do that, you need to pass in the recipient as the auction contract address and the amount you want to place a bid for this auction using the proper denomination for the bid token. And that's it. That's all you need to do to execute this transaction. So let's go back to our app and see how we can do that. So the first thing that we need is a bid auction address, well, contract client, right? Because we need to execute the bid contract send function. So in this case, we can see that we create the token contracts in this function here. I'm just going to do something really quick. I'm going to change the IDs from what we had to sell contract and bid contract respectively, right? And I'm going back. So what we need, essentially what the contract that we need to use is this one, right? So let's go to our place bid function, and the first thing that we need is your ref contract. Bid contract in this case, right? Because we want to call the send of this contract. And the next thing that I'm going to do is actually go ahead and convert the amount that I have. I get from the input here. For that, again, some validations here. So if the bid value not available, then I don't do anything. And then I think the next thing I will need to get are the decimals for info dot value. Now decimals, pass in the value of the decimals, and I need to convert this to a machine so I can send that to the send function. And again, what if the value equals true? I need to do await contract dot get send, and loading dot false here. Okay. Maybe again resetting the form and so on and so forth. Now for the send, I need to set the passing two things. The first one is a recipient and the second one is the amount. So for the recipient, we need to pass in the auction contract address. Okay, so in this case, I can get that as the address. Yep, as address. And then I need to pass in the amount variables. And that's it. That's all we need. So let's just export the place bit and the bit and the bit state. And I think that's pretty much it. So essentially what we did here was get the bit contract, get the decimals for the bit token, convert the amount to machine, execute the send transaction on the bit contract, and well, do some UI work so we can have some sort of feedback. So if I go back to place bit, and if I say, okay, I want to bit 10 secret, and if I click place bit again, Kepler is going to pop up. I'm executing now the secret contract, sending, passing in this message that in this case will execute the send message, passing in the recipient, this amount, well, some other stuff there. But what we need to care about is the recipient and the amount. Oh, sorry, and the amount. So if again I approve, the transaction is getting executed. After it got executed, then the button will be enabled again and the form will be cleared. Now, we just implemented how to bid on the auction, but there should be a way in which we can see if there is already a bid on this auction. And this is something that you can do by executing the has bid query on the auction contract. And in this case, for executing this particular query, you'll need to pass into this message the address. In this case, is the seller address and a viewing key. And we're going to go over which viewing key is this for from. But what you need to know is that only the auction creator is able to see if there are any active bids for this particular auction. So in this case, in this example, I bid it from the creator account. But if I go and change my wallet to use another wallet, and I go to Secret Pulsar, there we go, and I refresh, Well, apparently I don't have viewing keys for these tokens, but I'm going to be able to place a bid. So let me go here. I have 85 secret. I mean, I do have a viewing key, but it's not already loaded on Griptape. But I'm just going to place a bid. I'm going to say 15 for this particular bid, and I'm going to approve. Again, I'll need to wait until the transaction gets committed and completed. And that's it. Now, again, at this point, we don't know if, at least uh, from a non-creator standpoint, we're not able to know if this auction has any active bids. But as the owner, I should be able to say, oh, this auction has any bids, right? At this point, it should have two bids, one from the creator, and in this case, the whale account, right? So one from whale and one for test. So going back to whale, and let's see if we can execute a query to see if this auction has any bids. Let's go back to our code. And the first thing that we will need to do is to create a viewing key to pass in when querying the has bids message, right? So the viewing key that we need to create needs to come from the auctions factory contract. Okay, so the auctions factory contract is a contract that will create a viewing key, and then we're going to use that viewing key to see if the auction that comes from this factory has any bids, in case that I'm the auction creator. So for that, let's go back to our docs and see the create viewing key message. Here we go. To see how can we create a viewing key. So in this case, this is again the secret CLI command. We can see that we have we need to send back the create viewing key, an object with a create viewing key property, and that has an object that contains an entropy string. And that's pretty much it. So let's go back to our code and start writing that message into our contract definition. So let's do, in this case, we need to create a messages object, right, that contains message functions. We're going to call this message function create viewing key. And that create viewing key, again, will require handle message, and we'll need to return a handle message. Now, we have the handle message here. We need to say, okay, create viewing key here, and it has a property and growth and an entropy string that we need to pass in. Now, if you might wonder what this entropy is, this entropy is very, in a very rough, like a very simple way to explain it. The entropy is a seed that gets passed into a random number generator on the contract that will generate the viewing key for you. So essentially, we just need to pass in a seed for that number generator, and that's called entropy. In this case, an entropy is a random string that that has an arbitrary length, and yep, that's essentially what it is. But in order for you to make that most easier to handle, we have read about the best practices of how to actually build a entropy string, and we provide that to you on the context. So now it's a good time to talk a little bit more about what is the context and how it works, and what is it used for. So in this case, the context, as I mentioned, it's essentially a global store for different properties that might be useful to do when you are building your message, your JSON encoded messages or queries. So if we take a look at how the context looks, we can see that it has various properties that you might want to be interested in when building your messages. So in this case, we have the address, which refers to the address of the account that is selected on the account provider, in this case, Kepler. A key, which refers to the viewing key, if any, on this particular contract, and some other information like the permit, because there's a permit already enabled on that contract, and of course an entropy string that you can use. Right? So that's exactly what we need to get from the context in this case. So we want to get the entropy because we want to pass that in as part of the create viewing key message. And this entropy string uses the best practices provided by this by Secret Network to create the entropy strings. And therefore, I think that's pretty much it, what we need in order to create a viewing key. Okay. So now, now that we have our message, we need to create some sort of component that will help us to create the viewing key for the auctions factory. We strongly recommend that this particular component, in case of your UIs, is site-wide, or that is something that is always visible and known from a user that they have a viewing key. And because it's only one viewing key, what they need to create for the whole application, well, it should be some sort of, maybe on the header or an always visible component or something like that. In this case, I'm going to create a new component called create viewing key. If you were on the React streams, I didn't know how to call them either, how to call this component either. So that, I think, is simple enough right now. So for this component, I'm just going to do the following. In case that we have the viewing key, we're just going to show the viewing key. In case you don't, we're going to show a button for people to create that viewing key. In this case, the first thing I'm going to do is create a button, which will say create viewing key. And the second thing I will do is maybe a paragraph or something, generate container that shows your viewing key is, and then yeah, that's pretty much it. So now we want to, we will need to do some returns there. So first of all, what we need to do is to declare a viewing key state. So in this case, we will need the ref of string find and export that viewing key, and want to create a function, create viewing key to create our viewing key, and let's export that to. Okay. In order to show if we already has a viewing key, if we have a viewing key, so I'm going to create another state that will express that I have a viewing key for now. Viewing key, and I'm going to conditionally render this, so it has viewing key, right? And your viewing key is that, and in case that I don't have a viewing key, I'm going to show the button, which is going to be bind to a click event, which will execute the create viewing key function. And I think that's it. Now, okay. So the next thing we need to do is to implement the create viewing key. Okay. So I'm going back to the options factory because I need to add the create viewing key to our auction factory contract interface, which will represent the contract line that we create using the create contract line function. And this will return a promise again of a contract message response. Now, this is where things get a little bit interesting, because what we need to do, or what essentially we're doing here, is that any message, when you execute it, in contrast with what the query does. As you can see, the query returns directly the object that that represent the actual JSON that you get back from the contract when running that particular query, right? So in this case, we return a promise of an active auction list info, which has all the information that gets returned for that query. In the case for a transaction or a message, in this case, which is a create viewing key, what it gets returned is actually a Griptape object or a Griptape interface called contract message response. We take a look at that. This is a type interface. That means that we need to provide the type for what for some of the things that gets executed inside this function, or some of the information that we don't know the type of. Only when we are going to execute this function, we will know. In this case, the type that we need to pass in for the contract message response will be the type of the information that we're going to get when when creating Vue. Okay, so in this case, we will need to know like exactly what we get back from the create viewing key. In this case, I do know what I get in return, or at least I kind of remember. And I'm going to define that type here. So in this case, I'm going to call it viewing key response. Or viewing key response is fine. What you get back from executing the create viewing key is an object that has this shape. Okay. In this case, if there's any data that you get back from a message, contract specific data, you can get the data using the contract message response interface or object. But in order to know exactly what type it is going to be, that result, you'll need to pass in the type as the type of the contract message response. Right? So in this case, we are the create viewing key message function will return a promise of a contract message response of type viewing key response. Right? And that's pretty much it, what you need. Now we are able to call the create viewing key and see how we can set the viewing key. So in order to set the viewing key for this contract, we will need to we'll need to get the factory contract from the contracts of factory file and call the option factory create viewing key method. At this point, we can say, okay, this is the result, let's say, from the contract. Now, at this point, what we get returned is a contract message response object, right? Which is of type viewing key response. So with the contract message response have several methods that you will need to get, that you'll need to use to get the result from the contract. And the reason why we provide this API is because when you return contract-specific information from, in this case, from executing a message, the information that you get back is not, let's say, is not 100% available or easy to access the first time, because it comes encoded into a byte array of integers. Okay, that byte array of integers for sure represent a UTF-8 string that gets sent back from the contract when you execute the message. And obviously, this is a contract, a specific thing or contract dependent code that gets executed, and therefore the result of that of any message will depend on what the developer wanted to send back, right? But this API will make for sure much easier to get that information back from the contract. So the first thing I'm going to do is, before I move on, I'm going to show you how the result looks before doing anything. So I'm going just to call or doing anything else. the create viewing key, then and show you how that looks. Now, before I move on, I'm going to create a function to check if I already have a viewing key, so I can set the has viewing key function correctly. So check has viewing key. Sorry. And this check has viewing key will use the viewing key manager, right? Okay. So the first thing I need to do is check if I already have a viewing key. Viewing key manager dot get for auction factory dot ask. And auction factory contract of something that you always need to take into consideration, and maybe I missed to explain this before the first streams, is that for any contract client interface, you'll need to extend from the base contract interface. So take that into consideration, because if you don't do that, you won't be able to get the base properties for any contract. Okay. So remember, for any auction factory, for any contract client interface that you're defining your types for, extend from base contract. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So if I go back to here, to be able to call auction factory.add property, and let's do has viewing key value equals to type of if has viewing key if is different from untyped. And I'm going to use the onMount mounted. Do this when the component gets mounted. So is account available, on account available, and let remove on account available equals open or undefined. Then let remove on account available. First is account available. Check has viewing key. Else listen to the events. On account available. On account not available, not on account available. I think that's it, right? So let's go back to our app and see if that worked. Oh, well, I need to go to the, let's put this on the layout. I don't have some sort of header. Oh, I think I do. Oh, I think I don't. Yeah. So I'm going to create some sort of header here. the links for? I don't have links for going home. So I'm also going to create a script. Again. For creating key from components, creating key. Here we go. And what else? Stuff here, I guess. There we go. I'm gonna fix the styling here. Sorry guys for that. I'm gonna fix the styling later. But as you can see here, we have the create viewing key function. Button that will call the create viewing key function. And if I click it, and I wait, I can see Kepler pop up. If I approve this transaction, let's see what we get from that. So as you can see, we have a contract.js response handler. It has a response. This is what you get from the contract, what you get back. And as you can see, take a look at the data. This is where the information, the contract specific information is coming from. But as you can see, as I mentioned, you get a uint array, which is just an array of integers. But we need to somehow get a UTF-8 representation of that particular data. And then because we know that it's a common practice to communicate with contracts using JSON, then the contract developer should also return that in JSON. Therefore, we can just parse that as a JSON and get whatever the information is from the contract. And for that, we have the API that I described before. So if we go back to our example here, we can start using that API to see if we can get viewing. So in this case, the first API that we're going to take a look is, or that we need to use, is to check if this field is has something, because not all transactions, not all messages will return contract as domain specific code from that contract. So in this case, there's an API called isEmpty that you can check whether that particular field is empty or not. So in this case, if it's empty, we are not going to do anything. The next step is to get the response. So in order to get a response, we can use the get parse, which will essentially get the UTF-8 encoded string of the array of bytes and convert that or parse that into JSON. So you are able to handle this. And of course, when you do that, the parse method will return whatever the type you use in the contract message response interface. So in this case, the type you get back from that is a PNP response. Therefore, we have type completion for viewing key and so on, right? So what I'm going to do is to destructure that. And now that I have the viewing key, I can, first of all, set the viewing key state to that value, so viewing key. And finally, I think I can set that to the viewing key manager, because at this point, the viewing key manager doesn't know, right, that we have that viewing key available. So we need to use the add method to add a new viewing key to the viewing key manager. In this case, option factory viewing key. And I think that's pretty much it. I'm going to put that into catch. So when this successfully completes, I want to check again if we have a viewing key. And yep, I think that's it. That's all we need. So what we did was get the response from a message, check if it's empty. If it's not, then we parse whatever that message is. We get the information that we need, which in this case is the viewing key, and then we set the viewing key state to have the viewing key value, and then we add that to the manager. We add that key to the manager for this contract, and that's pretty much it. So if I go back to our application and going to refresh, going to click create viewing key, going to create that viewing key. Again, we might want to put some sort of better user interface there. And when this transaction completes, I got an error because, and this is something that I think I kind of was expecting, because I think what you get here is a property called key. Want to make sure about that. So I need to repeat to test this again and again and again. So let me just see the React example very quickly. So viewing key, yeah, it was key. So yeah, what you get from that is key. Therefore, here the viewing key, this is not viewing key. It's key. Okay. We go. So let's try that again. And approve. And we can see that okay, so it may be the case that we got an error from the contract. Fine. Let me check that, guys, again. Sorry for this. Oh, and I made a mistake again with the names of the types, which in this case here is Vue. So go back here and just this. And this is something that will depend again on the contract developer, how they create the key. So there's no a particular way or particular format that the key gets returned. So be careful with that. And this is like a general comment, not just for this particular application that we are building. So again, let's try. Hopefully, it will work in this design. So let's see. I think it should have worked, but it didn't. Refresh the thinking. Maybe some sort of. Let me check if I have the link actually. So, yeah, address. I think it's this one. It's auction factory. I do have a viewing key, so then the issue is here. Auction factory at PK, type of PK is boom, so that's the viewing key if is different from undefined. Let me try again here. Oh, well, here unmounted. Forgot to do this. Right. But let me see. Oh, I know what's going on. So I think gradient key, Let me see, guys, what the problem is. Hold on a second. Let me just bring out the viewing key. It's undefined. Y is undefined. Viewing key enter. On account available. Okay. Makes sense. I'm doing get auction factory.at. This is really interesting. So I have the viewing key here. So auction factory.
Sorry, Luis, catch me up on. I just took my eye off for a second. So we have the viewing key.
Yeah, we do have the viewing key, but when I get it from the viewing key manager, I'm getting undefined. So
And that auction factory.at, you're making sure that that is getting through, saying it's proper.
yeah, totally. I mean, one thing I can do is to remove the viewing key from here. Hold on, guys. So viewing key for the auction factor is this one. Put that back and compact this. Get back to my app. Replace that. Okay. So now we don't have the auction factor, I think. Okay, cool. Then we can create a viewing key. Oh. Okay, so let's secure in the transaction. Well, I don't know, guys, what happened. Maybe some weird state in which we got while doing the testing, but I think that worked. The only thing that didn't work was to set the viewing key here in case you have one. So viewing key dot value equals to be. We don't care if it's undefined or not because we know at least that we have it. Okay, so you can see this is a this is the viewing key that we can use, and then now we can start checking if a particular auction has any bids. Right? So let's go back to our auction page, and we are going to show. Well, we're going to put a button and a paragraph, maybe, if we have some bits. In this case, we are going to conditionally render that element if I have any bits, and I'm going to put this button check as bits. Find a straight click event, check as bits, and if and this auction has bits. Now, let's create the bit states. Boolean. And let's create a new function. It's check has bits. Sorry. Check has bits. So now in this case, what I want to do here is to call the has bits message query on the auction contract. So let's go back to our auction TS file. We're going to add a new query, which in this case is called assets. Request. Turn. Assets. Now, what you need to pass in for the has bits, if we go back to our docs, place the bits here. You need to pass the address and the viewing key. Okay? So in this case, the address is the address of the active account on Kepler. And in order to get that, you can actually use the context passing the address. Okay? So again, the first parameter of any query function or message function is a context. So we can get the address of the current account there. And the next thing that we need to pass in is the viewing key. Now, viewing key is not the viewing key for the auction contract. It's from the auction factory. So for the sake of this example, I think I'm going to pass in that viewing key as a parameter of the has-bits. And we're going to get the viewing key using the viewing key.get method in the auction page. So now that I have the has-bits function, I'm going to add that query to here, putting the proper function signature, and then I need to create the type for what we get from the has-bits. So in this case, I'm going to call this side has-bits response, and what you get back from this one is something that looks like this. That's it. So I'm going to set that as a type of the has-bits response. And now I'm able to call this query on the auction contract. So let's go back to the auction page and see if I can get if this auction has any bits. So the first thing you need to do is to get the contract. Again, that contract is the auction contract. This is the address. Again, yeah, it's fine. And contract.has-bits response to that, and I need to pass in the viewing key, in this case from the auction factory contract. So in order to do that, I need to use the viewing key manager.get and passing the auction factory.cat. Need to import the auction factory here. factory from the contracts option. Go back here and passing the viewing key in case that we have a viewing key. So if we have a viewing key, then we do nothing. And we are going to get a response from this, which is something like this. Okay, and finally, we need to set the has bits reference to the results that we get back from here. I'm going to export this as bits and check as bits. And I think the template is already there and has all bind. So let's go to our application and test. Okay, so I had a mistake. Hmm, 39:45. Um, mhm. It's so annoying that it's telling you the line number, but for the only for the script. So that's pretty annoying. Here we go. Okay. Now, if I go to, let's say, secret, the secret to the power to secret, I can check if I have bits, and if I do have. I think, first of all, I'm going to set this false, but has bits, check has bits, okay? Let me just see if I have this. Okay, cool. I'm going to do refresh, just to make sure I'm not doing anything weird there. Okay. Oh, it may be the case that this one doesn't have any bits. This is a girl. Oh, that's cool. Okay, so maybe let's improve this a little bit, right? So active bits element there. See that? If I click that, I'll get the same. That's fine for now. If I go to the Powell one, then I check this option has bits, right? It was in the secret, the Powell to secret, and not to the girl to secret secret. But as you can see, now the owner is able to see if any auctions has been, any bids has been placed for the auction the user created. And if I go to any other test account, I'll see that, well, first of all, I won't have a viewing key. So I'll need to create one. I'm going to create a viewing key. Maybe I'm going to add a okay, something interesting happened here. Got the can remove the viewing key. This is interesting, guys, because I was able to have some sort of issue 2 times in a row with the same thing. So let me just see. And to compact this, just to do a test. So now I don't have a viewing key. Okay, cool. I'll create a viewing key. Before I move on, actually, I'm going to go back to the create viewing key and add a loading stage. So we should be here for all of us to see what's going on. And here, loading array equals to loading dot gallery. Okay. If I export back to loading here, disable the button. Loading. Now this should be way better. I'm going to create a viewing key and approve. Okay, cool. So, and now I'm going to try to check if I have any bids. So just to make this example a little bit better, I think I'm going to well, I think this is fine. We just wanted to show that they are. So when you return, let's see that query. This results. default. If you're not the owner, what you will get at the end of calling the check has this is this error here, right? So address and our viewing key doesn't match auction creators information. So obviously you'll need to handle this particular scenario.
Luis, I think there are two options to handle that. So one would be you use the has bids as the filter, right? If you get that error, then you know they're not the owner. The other one is that I think there's a query that you can do to get the list of your auctions based on a viewing key.
Mm-hmm.
And that one we could then just not do the has bids or not, not include that. I'm curious what you think is the best solution. Is this auction a part of this list is one way, or I tried to query has bids and I didn't get anything?
Yeah, well, both requires, in terms of, let's say, performance, from a performance point of view, the best way should be the checking if the auction is part of a list, because that would require one query only.
Yeah, and based on that answer, actually, from a performance standpoint, maybe it's better to do the has bids because you're going to want to know that anyway, if they are the owner.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, totally. Yeah, that might be right.
Okay, it's sort of like it feels a bit hacky, but maybe it's actually the best way to do it. That's cool. Yeah.
One thing that you need to take, at least from a TypeScript standpoint, is that you're getting the views. Well, sorry, we are the auction. Yeah, here you are getting the has-been response as a response from this query, but it happens to have that there are two different types that you can get when you run this query, right? So you need to say, okay, well, can we either have this response or this object here, right? So in this case, let's say this is has its error, let's say, or viewing error, and say, okay, viewing key error. Error in a string, and set that as either like that, or create as goods. Let's say this is a success response. As this response equals to as the response, well, success as this response, or as this error as this response, right? Something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, in general, so you can either handle it. Yeah.
The reason you need to do that is because in the code you're going to want to check against has bids. What did you get back? And if you don't do that, you're going to get a type error when you try and check for that.
Exactly.
Got it.
That's correct. In this case, is as for this to work, you need to say here.
Oh, I see. Because you're getting basically two completely different objects from the same thing as a result.
Exactly.
What kind of a result did I get?
So in this case, what you get here, well, the most easier way
and get the type within your code. Like, can you use the type when you do an or, like use which one it is?
Yes, you can do that.
That's interesting. Feels a little bit like we're mixing tooling in a weird way, but anyway.
Yeah.
So the first thing would be to say results dot has bids is undefined. If so, right? If the property has bids is undefined, now you know you have a viewing key error instead of has bids, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I was just looking at your code, and like for an example, the changing the minimum bid is something that only the owner can do.
Yeah.
So that should also depend on whether or not that you can do the has bids works.
Yeah, that's correct. But just in order to make this to work, I mean, there are several ways that you can do that. I think the most simple one here would be to say something like this. Because essentially you can either have both, let's say. Obviously, this is not the best way because you're mixing both, and you'll need to check for both either. You'll need to do something like this, like if resolve that viewing key error and then do something else, do something else. Right?
Yeah, but that's okay because
that's okay. Yeah,
this will be the primary way in which we're not just using it for that. We're basically trying to eliminate an additional query. So I think this is fine because that essentially is whatever value you're getting back is, are you an owner?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think if I go back, well, that's pretty much it.
So just to preempt what you would need to finish this page, right? So right now you can place a bid if you're not the owner. If you're the owner, you can see if there are any bids and you can check and you can change the minimum bid, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
The only thing we have to do is have the ability to close the auction, which the owner has at any time, but the user only has after the time of the auction, after ends at. And then that completes this page. So we're getting close to the end here. We might just do that second part, or that part to finish this page up, and then we'll put the code up on GitHub so that you can see how we did it. And maybe we'll just start the first 5 minutes of the next one. We'll be just doing that, right, Luis? Something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, we're going to move on to creating new auctions. And then we're sort of done. I mean, it's a very it's a simple application, but it will work. You'll be able to buy and sell tokens from people directly, which is great.
Yeah.
I don't know. Unless you want to do you think is there anything you wanted to finish before? One thing I would like to see, Luis, and maybe just you can tell me how hard it is to get it so that when you have a viewing key, you can change it. And you can, instead of just creating, you could also add one. And the reason is because, like, if I go to another browser now and I create the viewing key, that one's going to be invalid, but I won't be able to get rid of it.
Got it. Okay.
So I think that's really important.
Okay, let me see. Okay, so let's go to the create viewing key component. And do we want to, when you say add, you don't say to
Manually.
You say just manually put it on this page, right?
That's a good question. So the one way of saying it is that you do add would be put whatever you want and it'll get added both to this page and it'll be set as the viewing key in the contract.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The other way would be to say it already exists on the contract. We just want it to be right on this page, so we need to change it. I'm not exactly sure how you would do that in an elegant way. Like let them create it and then check to see if it works. If it doesn't, then add it onto the contract. But like for right now, let's just do it so you can add your own manually, and it just gets added to it. Basically, giving us access to edit the viewing key manager as the user.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Then, in order to do that, actually that's quite simple. So the only thing you need to do is click a button here. So it can be either creating or adding, right? So I'm just going to do that. And add viewing key will find a add viewing key. Create a method. Function add viewing key. Let's import that. And that will require some sort of wait. Some sort of input at the viewing key. I think I should reuse that. So whoa. Hey guys, code is not as elegant as we would like, but so when I have this, then I can show at viewing key. If I click at viewing key, then I can.
Really, it should be add viewing key or edit. Like you should just do a VIF on the name on add. It should add or edit viewing key, depending on whether you have one. Right?
Oh, okay. So you mean just one button?
Well, that create viewing key would only be there if you don't have one. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
If you have one, then whether you have one or not, you'd have the add viewing key, but it would be called add viewing key if you don't have one, and it'd be edit viewing key if you do have one.
Okay. Okay. So.
Or change or something.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's right. You just do your VLs and then you close it around button, and then you just have this div always there, but you just have a span and you do a if then on add and make it change or add.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I think the only thing I need to do is maybe create another state for sorry, let me think. So first, if you have a viewing key, then you show the viewing key. If you don't have a viewing key, then you can either create or add a viewing key. If you add a viewing key.
Well, sorry, just to take a step back. This question is, if you have a viewing key, sorry, the question is, do you or do you not have a viewing key? If you have a viewing key, then you show it. If you don't, then you have a button that says create viewing key. Now, irregardless of that, you also have an add. You have another state. If you have a viewing key, if you don't have one, then you need an add viewing key button or add custom viewing key. And if you don't have a viewing key, then you do have one, then you need a change custom or change viewing key.
Okay.
Or maybe just a remove viewing key. Now that I think about it, because once you remove it, then you can make it whatever you want. I think that's right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So in this case, this is add viewing key or set viewing key. Let's say.
Yeah. I was wrong. Do it. Yeah. Leave this like that. That's only if you don't have a viewing key, and then let's just add a. If you do have a viewing key, you'll add a remove viewing key button, and that'll get us there. Make sense?
So if I have a viewing key, I add a remove viewing key button.
Yeah, so just wrap that div around the button that you just created in the input field, the VLs. So put with the other button, yeah, cool.
Okay.
Yeah, and then in the first span where you have one, just add a button up there that says remove viewing key.
Okay.
Yeah, great.
Okay, so move.
Perfect. So Griptape has two things, add and remove, are both Griptape parts of the viewing key.
That's a good point.
Viewing key manager, I guess.
Yeah. The viewing key manager has either add or set. I think there's not a concept of removing viewing keys. I think removing a viewing key for us is to set a new viewing key. Therefore, viewing key.
So that's fine, Luis. The only thing that is, if you do it that way, and maybe we'll add this offline. Sorry, maybe we're going long now. But I think that the answer to that then is that you need to basically have both options. So you either have the option to add and set, or if you already have one, then you also have the option. Then you have the option to create a new one, like generate one to override it, or add a custom one. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if I go to a page and my viewing key just isn't working for whatever reason, then I can just create a new one. Okay, great. But the reason you might find that is because you set it somewhere else and you might have saved that, so you want to be able to add it manually. That's all. So we'll just put that into we'll do that, and then we'll highlight that at the beginning of the next session as well.
Yeah. Let's do it offline, and on the next stream we'll explain.
Great. Well, anyway, this is great. So we're pretty close, guys. Like the create option is a little bit complicated. So but it's not terrible. And then there's a lot more that could be added to this app, obviously. But that's why it's a hackathon and not just a copy our work, because you guys will be able to create something much better than us. But yeah, okay. So we'll see you next week. Thanks so much.
See you guys.
Don't do this. Bye.
Bye, guys.